Do you think that women should have equal rights in the workplace?
Yeah, do you?
Well, ain't there the problem that if they start getting them there, then they're going to start asking for them at home?
So at the top, I mean, you know, it's a mimetic exercise, right? To try and collect Kurt Cobain's top 50 albums, like who really gives a shit? But there's a couple of curious things in there, and there's a curious, in terms of used CDs and not used CDs, there's a really curious opportunity, which someone pointed out to me actually, and I didn't realize was possible and still an option, which is that you can buy the complete recorded output of the Wipers direct from the band for $15 on CD. It's $15. And I did, and because I had, so this was originally released as like a heavy, thick plastic 3 CD case, but they released it as a paper fold-out wallet with it. It's the same discs. They're not CDRs, they're real, they're pressed. So at the top, if you're interested in any of this music and the history of all the bands that, you know, informed Cobain, and I mean, Wipers essentially ran Pac and W in terms of rep, Youth America, all 3 of these records are absolute classics. The idea that you can get them for $15, all, you know, it's new is pretty awesome. And I mean, you know, to round it out, they're charging 18 for the single LPs, and then these record store day editions, they're charging 34. Now, I actually got these on cutout. So one of the things about record store day is like they'll have big cred swings, like they'll try and go for the rafters and try and get like a the single CDs are supposedly CDRs. I don't know because I haven't bought them. But yeah, Greg Sage is running all this. It's mental. But anyway, these are beautiful. I have them. I got them, like I say, on cutout. A lot of record store day stuff, you know, they misjudge the market. Like they want to put out something that's credible and cool, but like it doesn't sell. At this point, almost everything sells because it can be scalped. So it's not as much of an issue now as it used to be. In terms of not as much of an opportunity now as it used to be. Like it used to be that you would, you know, things would fly under the radar in record store day and you could get a total bargain on cutout vinyl, like, you know, a year later or something when you go to the stores that have them. I mean, in where I am in Massachusetts, it's going to be like a Newbury Comics, and I bombed a suburban Newbury Comics that's really isolated, and they had these cut out to like $25 each. And anyway, so, you know, again, this is why CDs are compelling, because it's the reference master audio. For $15 you're getting all 3 albums. And again, I did buy this. I can tell you factually, these are pressed CDs. These individuals, he tells you right on the site, are CDRs for $8, which, you know, I don't know why you wouldn't want that. Yeah, the hi, how are you memes and the Cobain effect. So I didn't, you know, this could be a totally stupid stream and end up being more conversational, because I didn't like prep and research what's happened with these. And a lot of these are obvious records, like we've talked about before. We've talked about, you know, Sonic Youth's Daydream Nation is on this list. You know, it's not like a lot of it is a shocker. But if you look at this as just like a topic, as a survey of things, you know, he did it. It's a good window to me. Yeah, exactly. So the comment you're making about how it's crazy that he was aware of Swans. There's a number of records on this that it's sort of like crazy to think of him being aware of, or like that, not only aware of, he was already a huge fan of and had inspired him when he was younger. I mean, it speaks to the fact that there were really good record stores and there's a college community nearby. And that's how you have people that are just like, wow, you're listening to, you know, friggin' Saccharin Trust, like in Aberdeen. It's really weird that, he was so astute, but it's because he was, you know, he was a glommer. He was a music kid like me or anybody else, and going into record stores and asking older people who, you know, most of the time that's the way it worked in the analog age. You were talking to somebody who used to be in a band or whatever, was part of the scene in some way. And so they have an entire memory of like kind of a slice of time that they lived through and what was big then. And they pass that down. Yeah, the Surfer Rosa thing that's totally about Albini. I mean, look, if you read the Pixies oral history, Fool the World, I've recommended it before, recommend it again. It's great because that's what I like, pure oral histories. I don't want to read some person's version of the history of a band or of a record label. Like, it's fine as history, but oral histories is where you get the juice. The Pixies one's fantastic, and in it, it's really funny because they have a quote from like Jay Mascis totally bagging on Gil Norton, just being like, I don't know why they did all those records with him. They all sound like shit. And he's talking about Doolittle, which like, that's probably one of the 3 most foundational records of my childhood. Like, it's Jane's Addiction's Nothing Shocking, Doolittle, and I don't know what else. But it's funny that already, way back when, pre-internet, he's like an Albini snob, majorly an Albini snob, and like clocking everything the guy did. Because it's not the only Albini production on there. But anyway, if we go through the list, like I say, 3 of them ultimately are those Wipers records. And, to get them direct from Sage like that, that's quite an opportunity. So I would definitely recommend that. Another one, we've talked about before, repeatedly, is Stooges. I talked about finding a copy of a first edition CD of Stooges and how much better it sounded. It was a live stream where I did about the Loudness War, and so the big problem, is this album. And this album is, depending on which version you get, like it can be unlistenable. So, we've gone through this before. I think it's something any music nerd knows probably plenty about. But the remaster that Iggy himself did in 1997 is notoriously one of the worst sounding, most amusical shit shows you're ever going to hear. So you want to make sure, if you're going to check this out, avoid it. It gets done again later. The 06 or 08 version is Bowie, right? This is the one where they fix it, if I recall correctly. No, so wait a minute. This is the one. Wait, why is this saying Iggy himself in 2006? Because his was 97. Anyway, whatever. Most of this is a disaster, and you want to get the most recent one or the oldest, is my point. The redressing of what a catastrophe this album was happens very recently. So, depending on where you are, what's available to you, look for the newest pressing you can on CD or the oldest. This is pretty infamous, this Japanese 2 CD version that they did with Columbia, that has the Atlanta Richards show on it. I mean, I can't imagine you're going to be able to find that affordably, but man, that is a great way to get raw power. I think that they didn't do the full thing here, so I guess there's these promo copies that they did. But yeah, I mean, essentially this is the one you want to target. The 2010 quote Legacy Edition. It does have the Peaches show. Okay, great. So you can get that on US, and this is where I would point anybody. And look, you got copies for sale for 11, 18 sealed. Philadelphia Music, I've bought from them before. It's a 2 CD set. It is a really infamous, absolutely canonical bootleg, one of the most famous bootlegs like ever. And yeah, if you've got money to splash out, $20-$40 you want to drop on something, this is a really, really historic record in terms of the technical disaster of this record being reissued and the abuse of analog and old recordings for the CD market. So yeah, the US CD version is legendary. I mean, not US. The 1997 remaster is just flat out legendary for how blown out it is. It's hilarious. It's just nuts. So, it's something I'm sure can find relatively easily looking here, and the issue though is that you gotta hope that the dynamic range is like literally sub 1. I think you're right, NGC. The issue with this is something that I just ran into, right? And it's not infrequent. It's probably happened to me a handful of times, and I don't ever get upset about it or blame sellers or whatever, but it's frequently the case that stores will have things misallocated, meaning you think you're buying this edition and then you buy it and you get a different pressing. It just happened to me when I was trying to find, in another stream I mentioned how I collect the Sub Pop promo CDs because the artwork is like iconic to me, having been like a 90s music radio person. I ordered what was listed as one of the variants. There's 2 variants of the Cobain White Birch promo, and I ordered it, and it came, and it was the regular album, but it had a hole punch through the UPC, through the SKU. So the seller, in good faith, was trying to make anyone who would buy it aware that it was a promo copy, because that's what that indicates. But it was listed under the promo copy with the different artwork, and so, you know, kind of a mix-up. You know, I'm not one of those people who freaks out about it. I didn't make them refund me anything, whatever. I'll give it to somebody. Maybe we'll, I'll get it over to shipping and we'll stuff it in with a MutualSkies order. Somebody orders one of our records. Anyway, the first CD of this is actually very, very late in coming, if I remember right. Yes, so Raw Power doesn't even come out on CD at all until 1988. This is really, really good, strangely, because of the preservation of the headroom and what a mess this album is sonically. Shake Appeal, title track, Search and Destroyer, and Gimme, the whole thing, front to back. You know, the fact that it's like, you get the OG Columbia red spine, I love that shit. I love that shit. So to me, this is the kind of record that I would want to have like probably 3 copies of. I'd want to have this OG, I'd want to have the 97 Infamous Blowout, and then I'd want to have this latest Legacy Edition one. Because again, you get the famous bootleg, and you get the fact that everyone's been through, yeah, they just uploaded the remaster. Everyone's been through the cycle of doing this wrong and doing records injustice is really the way to talk about it. And so in this one, you get the whole story of the Loudness War, the whole story of the misunderstanding or the failure to comprehend what CD represented and what its potential was. So, yeah, I mean, agree in the chat. That you know, that's really what I'm saying. There's only so many records that hit this note of just defining this issue. And if you're a used CD collector, if you're somebody who is really bought in on what this uncovers about music history, you know, archivally, certainly not historically, because this is a vinyl album, but the evolution of CD itself as a medium, and the potential, the failure to capitalize on that potential, and the ability to abuse it is all right here in Raw Power. So it's a great one to fixate on, to collect, and as we've seen here, it's relatively affordable to take that down. Surfer Rosa by the Pixies. Now for me, being my age, being Gen X, anybody, you know, I'm very young Gen X. I'm almost a couple years away from being a millennial, I think. But anybody my age would have gotten this as the combo CD that came out on Rough Trade in the late 80s with Come On Pilgrim attached to it. So that one is somewhere here. It doesn't look like they're, yeah, here you go. Wait, what? Why is it, they're not labeled right? They don't have it labeled with Come On Pilgrim. That's so annoying. I don't know how I'm going to find it. But at any rate, the original album, okay, so this is going to be a mess of trying to find the road. But anyway, there's no need to go heavily into this. This is the horrible copy of this. I actually own it, and I didn't bring it over here. It's on the other side of the room. I am one of the idiots that bought this absolutely stupid, absurd vinyl box set of this album. I'm so angry that I did it. It's just absolute crap, and it was just, you know, 4AD bilking everyone. I'm trying to find it. It's so bad. It's not the MFSL. It's this giant brown box set. I don't know. I don't even see it. Whatever. It's awful and really just shameful. But this one, as I say, the canon CD for this period, for the late 80s, is the one that combines Surfer Rosa and Come On Pilgrim, and so that's the one you want to find. And there's tons, and there it is right there. So I don't know why this is listed as that's so weird. But it says right there, and Come On Pilgrim. I mean, this is the CD all of anyone us got. And it's you know, it's everything you need. It's both of them. It's the original masters. You know, Come On Pilgrim is not produced by Steve Albini. Steve Albini does Surfer Rosa. Come On Pilgrim was done by Gary Smith. And I think Sean Slade and Colderi might have engineered one of the sessions. I can't remember. Does it say? Those credits aren't here. What a convoluted mess. But anyway, GAD 803. Okay, so this was an Italian version. He's saying this is listed as unlisted. GAD 8030, there it is. Nope, that's just the album. GAD 803. Okay. There, no, that's not it either. GAD 803, at the end. Nope, it's not. It's still the original. Anyway, so look for that. Look for the combo. It's great value. You know, Come On Pilgrim on its own, it has its own definition to it. It certainly sounds heavier. It's not an Albini production. They do work in isolation nicely. There's no reason not to buy both. The Pixies are easy to get all day on CD. It's a non-starter. And they're, you know, they're great records. It's, you know, to me, Doolittle, the songwriting is the greatest on Doolittle of any of them. I mean, that album front to back is perfect. The thing about Surfer Rosa is the sound was so astonishing and new and fresh, and that's what made Albini's name, was the room sounds he got on the snare and the kick, the whole kit. I found the OMR Surfer Rosa vinyl at a thrift store in Bushwick for $20. Holy crap, that's crazy. Yeah, there was a Mobile Fidelity Sound Lab 180 gram reference press of this. Yeah, OMR original master recording MFSL stuff is total snake oil. It's a joke. The levels are, if you're into vinyl, to me, it's pretty legit. The reference levels of an original pressing of this versus that are really nuts. It's way stronger. So, I mean, if you're into it for vinyl, that, you know, and you have a lot of money to throw around, that does exist. Anyway, they're both incredible records. I think the thing, you know, talking critically about it is that Surfer Rosa is a lot about the sound and not as much about the songwriting. And that's the difference between this and Doolittle, because Doolittle does suffer for really kind of corny late 80s production, especially the way the drums are done. Now, I like the way the kick drum comes out in that sense, but the snare is pretty bad. And it doesn't have any of the guitar attack that makes this record so powerful and just shocking for the time. Like, Doolittle sounds kind of like Jane's Addiction's Nothing Shocking, you know, like a major West Coast produced record with a big, thick, you know, chubby drum sound and very liquid, heavy, smooth bass. You know, Albini is totally contrary to that, and it's all over this record. So, I mean, that's the distinction between the two and what makes it so important. And just to get, you know, Pod out of the way, The Breeders' Pod was also one of my absolute favorite records as a kid. So unique, another Albini production. And, you know, a really interesting story. We did a stream about 4AD. The story of the Breeders is crazy. It could have gone so many different ways, because Tanya Donnelly was originally in this band. They did their demos at Fort Apache. I have the DAT because I used to work at Fort Apache, and they ran me a DAT of the actual demos for this album, which sound very little like it and feature a lot more Tanya Donnelly. The song Geppetto was floating around for Throwing Muses already, I think, by this point when they were doing The Real Ramona. And basically Tanya Donnelly is like wants to write sort of sugary pop songs, and she's fantastic at it. She even had a later song she had an album called Love Songs for Underdogs, I think in 2002. There's a single from that called Pretty Deep, and there's also this incredible B-side to the single of Pretty Deep called Influenza that sounds like a Pixies song from this period. It's really astonishingly good, and like no one's ever heard it. Definitely recommend taking a flyer on that. Again, Influenza, Tanya Donnelly solo song from the Pretty Deep single. You can get the Pretty Deep CD single for nothing. There's two variants because it was the 2000s. There's a CD1, CD2. But when we're talking about Pixies and we're talking about this period when she was in this orbit, touring with them and forming the Breeders with Kim Deal and Josephine Wiggs, she was writing some incredible stuff, and a lot of it was just on the shelf forever because Belly blew the hell up from Feed the Tree, and suddenly she was like part of the women in rock 90s thing, and she was very good looking. And so she was way out in front, and then you had problems with some of the members and substance abuse, and so this second album, King, is just a disaster to get done, takes too long, and while it has a hit, you know, it's a significantly lesser album than the debut, which I still think is fantastic. It's just that this whole thing, this whole period, these records are all happening at the same time. They're all being written at the same time. Throwing Muses, Real Ramona, Breeders' Pod, and what becomes essentially Belly's debut album, Star, right? Or yeah, the one with Feed the Tree on it. And so one of the issues is like, how is this all getting divvied up? Like, who gets what songs? Kristen Hirsch is very like she's very like, she's got her own mind. She's very willful. I don't know. She knows what she wants, and she does not want to write pop songs. Like, she's one of those artists that's like totally against hooky pop songs. She wants them to have edge, which is why you get like the in the chorus of Not Too Soon, the hit single from Real Ramona. I mean, you want to talk about an album with horrible early 90s, late 80s drum production. The Throwing Muses, Real Ramona is way up there, but it's a phenomenal record. I mean, you should be reeling these off essentially in a row, like Pod, Real Ramona, Doolittle. They're all right at the same time. And they were all fantastic. And this is like when I'm, 15, 16, learning about cool music, and it's all related to where I'm living out, in Massachusetts, in Boston. So it was a pretty exciting and cool time seeing like English goth label 4AD talking to Gary Smith and picking up Pixies, and now like they're playing enormous shows. And I've told this anecdote a million times about Oedipus at BCN, that this like guy who was the god of radio in New England for alternative non-FM program, MR programming. And they were doing a battle of the bands that they do every year, and one of the pluggers was like, we should see, maybe the Pixies would be willing to play. And this other kid who was younger and actually knew what the fuck was going on in music was like, dude, they're literally playing festivals in England right now. Like, you're so out of touch. Because people in America, it's like the Backstreet Boys. Like, the Pixies broke in England a full year and a half before like anybody in America, or a year at least, was listening to them. Because of 4AD and that record getting around and Gigantic getting plugged, they were doing phenomenally well. And then directly in Europe and in America, they couldn't get fucking arrested. I mean, the Pixies bow out opening for U2, and a tour that made no sense, that no one wanted them on, that they didn't even want to be on by the end. I mean, the Pixies playing Giants Stadium, it's the dumbest thing I can think of. And it didn't work. It was really awful, the end of the Pixies. But Breeders' Pod, another Steve Albini production, put this alongside Slint's Spiderland. It's one of the signature haunting, pre-post rock, but just like really acoustic, natural sounding records like of all time. And Cobain doesn't list the EP that comes after this, Safari, but that's also one of my favorites. That was a really iconic release. One of the first digipacks I think I ever bought was like Safari and like The Cure's High single, I think, and New Order's Regret. Those are like, digipack was a new thing, cardboard digipacks. I also, Trant, love the version of Happiness as a Warm Gun on this. Doe was kind of like the little hit, but Hellbound was like would have been the hit if it was produced well. I mean, if this was produced by well, I mean radio friendly. Both Fortunately Gone and Hellbound could have maybe, but Fortunately Gone is like, what is it? It's like a minute and a half long. I love this record front to back. I love Limehouse and Only in Threes. And like I say, the demos are really, really cool because they're so different. They do Driving on 9, which ends up being on the next record, and they do like a whole bunch of kind of country songs as warm-up songs. It's really neat. They're on YouTube. Someone else has this and has totally put it out there, the whole session. So definitely recommend you look that up. And yeah, Breeders' Pod is so different, night and day, from Last Splash, the record that broke through to MTV with Cannonball and Divine Hammer and Saints. Songs I love, but that sound like, Dinosaur Jr. I mean, Pod is so bizarre. You've never heard a record like this if you haven't heard it. And, the drummer, the drummer from Slint plays on it, but isn't credited. If I recall correctly. Albini called him up and had him play on it. Yeah. So it's Brit. Yeah, I forgot. So he went under, I don't know why he went under Shannon Doughton, whatever. I don't know this whole story. I don't remember. It's probably in the goddamn documentary on Lance Bangs did. That's in the Spider-Man box set. I don't remember. Moving on. The Vaselines. So Kurt, similar. These two are kind of right in a row. It's in the doc. They talk about it. Okay. I'll have to rewatch that on YouTube. I'm not opening the Spider-Man box set. I never opened it. So two things Kurt is hugely responsible for are getting Vaselines and Raincoats out in the world and in America. This CD is essentially Kurt Cobain telling Sub Pop to put this out. It's hilarious. He was just like, yup, this is going. And, it's not like he's just getting them the check of covering Molly's Lips and Son of a Gun, which I think are both of those on Incesticide, or they were B-side, I can't remember, but, it's not, he doesn't, like, it's not enough that he's going to cover it. He's actually going to get this entire compilation out, and we all bought it and we all loved it. It's great, but it's very alien, to like an American teenager or whatever that has never heard, Twee and C86 and has no idea about like any of that Tallulah Gosh stuff or what was going on over there. It's really cool that he did this for this band, and they're on the Hormoning EP. Okay. Then they were both on Incesticide. Great. But, this ends up becoming a whole other thread. Vaselines weren't around for very long. And at the same time, there was this other version of it, which was bizarre, called All the Stuff and More, that was going around. This was another label had put out like another, Avalanche had put out this different version in the UK. I have this. I don't know. I must have just found it cheap to get it, and again just to have both. But this is like, for an American teen from the early '90s, this is actually a pretty iconic image. Everybody was taking a flyer on this because of Kurt, and you can get it for nothing all day. This is a total no-brainer. If you ever see it, pick it up. This is just incredible. Like indie folk, presaging Bell and Sebastian and everything that blew up in that whole lane. They were there first, doing all of it. And the other band that he did this for was the Raincoats. So this one was interesting because there were other ways you might have heard of the Raincoats, and I had, which was the Kitchen Tapes. So Raw Records, ROIR. Anything this label put out, you were going to buy. Like Neil Cooper, Reach Out International Records, right? Anything that you saw that was on ROIR and you were like a wannabe punk indie kid in the late 90s, that you bought it sight unseen. It didn't matter if it was the Scatolites, whatever. Because he just had the fucking relationships, he had the ears, and he was putting out stuff like the Flesh Tones and stuff, Bad Brains, the cassette. Everybody had that. And it was just like, it was a total no-brainer. It kind of, it's not something that the early stuff we would have heard about, but he was keeping stuff in print, and apparently is still active in some other way that I don't even know about. Oh yeah, that's right. He did Night in New York. Anyway, I'm getting distracted. But so because of the power of that label, similar to like, I mean, I don't like if you saw Slash, maybe something like that, like Homestead, right? If I saw something with Homestead on it, I would absolutely get it, because it's, it's like the cool label that's doing indie stuff, like Crab Stick, right? I'll fucking buy a Crab Stick record because it says Homestead on it. It was just one of the cool labels. It was a guarantor of cool, and they had done the Kitchen Tapes, and I had that. This is the first thing I heard by Raincoats. And so for me, this version, which is recorded on a fucking boombox at the NY kitchen, at the kitchen in the New York Performing Arts Center, this version is so amazing, and I'm stuck with it. Like, I love how real and natural it is, and how the voices and the kind of like emotion of it is so nervy and fun and up, and it's a great fucking track list too, the whole thing front to back. It's just a really, really great release. That's, again, you want to be aware that it's the sound quality is pretty poor, but if you haven't heard Raincoats and you hear them, especially if you hear like Moving, which is really, really sort of more heavily produced, with Animal Rhapsody at the end. You know, it's kind of like the Slits, right? You know, the other band in this orbit. If you hear the Slits Peel sessions, it's like, wow, this is one of the coolest bands that wasn't like photocopy punk at the time. Like they were legit post-punky as early as like September 77 was the first Peel session, I think. And by the time Slits get in the studio, Don Letts is all over it, and they got Budgie, and they're trying to do reggae and dub, and it's like a totally different band, sounds completely different. And so this, you know, this same sort of thing happens with Raincoats. In the beginning, you know, in the first album, it's much more raw and shambolic and post-punky, Adventures Close to Home, The Void, like, you know, it's great, but it's really sort of all over the place, really still half a step in to kind of shambolic punk and post-punk and DIY. And then in Oddie Shape, it tightens up in kind of that similar way that Slits do. A lot of people don't, this isn't an album that's enormously popular. It's kind of the divisive, heavy, thick second album. But Moving is really sweet and heavy. And so, you know, across all of that, to me, the Kitchen Tapes is kind of the coolest place you can arrive with them. And, you know, definitely recommend it. This box set that came out compiles all of that. But it's Japan only. I've never seen it. And the thing is it has this live stuff and a video clip of the Fairy Tale in a Supermarket video that I've never even seen. Anyway, so yeah, that's kind of another thing that Cobain did. That's something that he used his power really gregariously in that way. I always respected it. I thought it was such a cool move. And you know, he didn't really do anything necessarily for this because this had already been a big thing. The kind of, you know, chic hipster resurfacing of the Shags. This happened in the late 80s. They're not even showing the right CD. That's really strange. Or the 90s. No, it was way earlier than that. Again, this may be a cataloging issue. This isn't the right cover. And I don't see the right cover, so that's weird. The cover of this that I have is, it's because it's the Rounder comp. That's why. It's not the album. Philosophy of the World is its own thing, but then there were other songs that were like hanging out on a 7-inch, and they all get compiled for this. This is like such an iconic album cover for late 80s, kind of like people who are, you know, Rounder Records, Yola Tango World, these guys right there. This is all kind of happening at the same time. Shags become this like, you know, champion band for all of these kind of, you know, jangly, late 80s, kind of what becomes the Hoboken scene, you know, mid 80s, etc. The early Yola Tango stuff. You know, this is exactly the kind of stuff that they loved. And so anyway, this was what I had. It looks like it's not that cheap to come by, but it sounds great. And the reissues of the Philosophy of the World album all uniformly sound like shit to me. So if you want to check out Shags, really like invest the $8 and get this, because it's really well produced. It has an incredibly crazy, hilarious liner notes. By the way, this is like 3 teenage girls in New Hampshire. Their dad like had like a recording studio or something. I can't even remember the whole story. It's absolutely hilarious. But NRBQ's involved. They had originally put the album out, and it was just like this, you know, crazy, you know, gonzo goof. And you know, yeah, it maybe is a little bit pricey. Yeah, well, there's someone here who's got it for $8.50 if that's in the States, but it's too bad if it's pricey, but I guess it's not that shocking. Yeah, there's a couple people here who have it for $10. I mean, to me, this is worth $10 for sure. I mean, because it's one and done. And I'm so happy when you're near. Oh my God. And my pal Foot, like this is, it's weird. Like they can't play. And it's like this weird gambit NRBQ's guys are doing, and they put it out, and I don't know. It's really strange. Yeah, it was Fremont, New Hampshire, and their parents insisted they play, and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, that's one of Kurt's, and it was a very, my point is, it was like a very hip kind of thing in the late 80s to be aware of that. One of the craziest things on this list is Fang. He recommends Fang's Landshark. This is like absolutely impossible to find. And I actually didn't even know it was because he was repping it. So I collect Boner Records stuff. I'm a huge fan of this label. but if you don't know Boner Records is the label that brought you a lot of things, but Melvin's principally, and a kind of a joke anti-music band called Warlock Pinchers that I've always loved. And he also had Frightwig, who were fantastic, another kind of East Bay thing, similar to Fang, who we'll go back to. Like I talk about, ROIR, R-O-I-R being a buy on site. Boner was massively a buy on site label in the very early 90s. I had all their shit. And so, yeah, it's not like it's all great. I was never a steel pole bathtub fan. They were not called that by most people. They were derisively called steel pole butt. And that's kind of how that went. But Boner had a lot of, it took them forever to get going. And the first kind of thing they came out with was this Landshark record, which is really fucking good hardcore punk, super dark. And my point is, I didn't realize that this is the Cobain tax, so you're never going to get this. And anybody who's got it is charging like $30 for it, which really sucks. And I don't even think it's ever been released on CD. So, certainly if you find a store that doesn't realize why this is popular and why they should be pricing it high, they should. But it's major Cobain tax. But the thing is, it's also great. And I think it's the first Boner record. I think it's the first thing Boner Records puts out, which makes it even more cool because, Boner is like, yeah, it is. It's the first thing they ever put out. So, I mean, that's going to be hard. Special Forces, World Domination, holy shit. They also, this is something we've talked about before. This became kind of a popular meme, Fearless Iranians from Hell, another classic Boner 7-inch release. They have a comp, though. They have a fairly famous CD comp that came out that you can get all of it on. So yeah, Fearless Iranians from Hell, another great Boner act you should check out. And that's also where Cobain hears MDC. So Millions of Dead Cops, Millions of Damn Christians, all the different things they called themselves. Another just like classic mid-80s kind of nihilist punk band, total fuck the world band. Cobain recommends the OG MDC record. So this, I'm pretty sure you can get all day for nothing. This has got to have been released at least 8 times that I'm aware of, because this is just iconic as hell. I mean, you should have this. If you can tolerate punk in any way, you must hear John Wayne was a Nazi. I mean, you must know this record. So if you don't, definitely get it. And it looks like there's 194 copies and probably plenty on CD in the $5 range. So heavily recommend that. Looks like the last, they just did a Beer City reissue on vinyl. Let's get that vinyl, baby. Let's get that vinyl tax. Anyway, yeah, I mean, the CD of this should not be an issue. They did Beer City did a reissue in 14. So right there, this is probably all day, well, $8. I mean, I would probably get this because you're getting so much extra shit, but it's going to, I shouldn't say that. I haven't heard it. For all I know, it's exactly the same as the original CD, and they understand mastering and it's not blown out. For me, the OG CD, the thing I like about it is it has the black border, which is not right, but this is how I grew up looking at this record. So I grew up wrong, and it's stuffed full of stuff. I mean, the original album, is how it's like what, 14, 15 songs. The jacked out comp they put out is 27. I mean, this is what I grew up with, and it's got lots of great shit. So it doesn't look like it's easy to get. So thankfully I don't need to buy it. Oh, well, it's sealed for $25. I wouldn't chide that store for that. A lot of this is, a lot of Cobain's things are things we don't need to cover. Like, we don't need to talk about fucking Sex Pistols and whatever. But right at the top, he does have some really interesting things. Like, he has Pagan Icons, Saccharine Trust, I mentioned at the beginning of this, which this really is nuts to me that he was aware of this. Because it's like one of the first, things that SST gets out. But, it's probably SST was everything, you know what I mean? Late 80s, even mid 80s. And the SST catalog was the smartest move any company made. So, that you just look through that and then you ask somebody who's older, right? And then you're going to know, oh, you got to hear that Saccharine Trust, record, Pagan Icons. And it is fantastic. The original 12-inch and everything. I don't know how many times they've reissued this. Wow, not many. That's crazy. I don't have this on CD. I only ever had this on a tape. I got a tape of this off a buddy. I don't even own this, so I'll have to go out and get it. There must be some kind of Saccharine Trust comp that has everything. But yeah, this, in terms of Cobain's like ear and the people he's hearing from and hearing about music through, to me, this one was one of the big standouts, along with Swans and a couple others. AmRep, yeah, AmRep was another huge label at the time. Amphetamine Reptile, Jelly Bean Offers label. But, you know, then we go through and it's like, okay, Black Flag, My War, Bad Brains, Rock for Light, you know, Gang of Four Entertainment. It's all kind of normal. The interesting thing about his list is that he's really trying to like get himself some clout. He's like trying to like cred trumpet, because most of what he's recommending is like super old early 80s shit. And this is a theme with record nerds. Like, record geeks always want to prove that they know all about the last generation. You know what I mean? It's really consistent. And Cobain is so trapped and victimized by this, just like I was. Everybody my age was telling me all about this stuff in the 80s. And it's the older generation being like, oh, you can't believe what you missed out on. And Cobain's list is just dripping with it. Young Marble Giants, you know, he also got that in Cirque, essentially. Colossal Youth, the compilation with the original album and stuff appended to it. You know, and that becomes Marine Girls. He's got the Slits cut, which I just talked about. I mean, I don't know. He just likes the song Typical Girls, I would assume, because he actually doesn't write Cut. He writes Typical Girls. I don't know. It's just really funny. Like, he's got the Faith Void split. Like, in 93, no one was repping the Faith Void split outside of hardcore. Like, no way. And you know, the fact that he's got like such a huge palette of stuff, he's got that kind of switch in his head. He's not like a scene stir in that way. He's not. It's why his band isn't a hardcore band. It's why his band is kind of a blend of things. And you know, I think you give him credit for it, but at the same time, it's just kind of weird to me, because a lot of it feels sort of like homework, and that's fine, but it's, you know, it's kind of strange. You know, he's definitely got like a thing for early American hardcore. He's got Fear the Record on there. He's got 2 Black Flag records, Damaged in My War. And they're not really extraordinary choices, but you know, I think the Faith Void thing, and he also has Rites of Spring in here. That's all about like, I am aware of Discord, like Discord good. You know what I mean? And then like that back then, that's kind of what the feel of this list is. If you look back at it as somebody, you know, my age who was kind of growing up in this, it's like, well, you learned about music through cool labels. So it's SST, it's Discord, that's what's guiding him. It's Rough Trade. You know what I mean? That's how he's learning about music. And when you look at his list through that lens, what stands out is the things that aren't part of that. Like, Boner Records is cool. I checked out Boner Records bands. You know what I mean? That's what's happened. And that's what his list is made out of. The things that stand out are the mainstream things, which is like REM's Green. That blew everyone's mind. Like, because when he came out, he was like, REM fucking rules. At a time when REM was really uncool. Like, it's post Everybody Hurts. It's post Losing My Religion. REM has become a very overexposed band. And Cobain is like, no, they're awesome. Even though they're doing some of their worst shit. Well, no, I mean, Automatic is good, but they weren't really, really bad until he was dead. But point being, you know, Cobain bucked a trend there, and Stipe absolutely, you know, adored him for it. And that whole triangle of Courtney Love, Michael Stipe, and Kurt Cobain's whole fucking, you know, psychotherapy menage a trois is just fucking ridiculous. But again, it's a cool thing he did with his fame, in my book. And of course he had K too. I mean, let's not forget, he's got Beat Happening on the list, and he's got, you know, stuff like that. Daniel Johnston. He does have a lot of like, he has Flipper. I don't think he has like Weirdos or anything really SF heavy. I don't remember. But like another standout, I guess I'd say, is Aerosmith, his Rocks. So like, you know, back in the day, there's this legacy kind of thing of, you're a Toys in the Attic person, you're a Rocks person. Because those two records are both astonishingly good front to back. But like Aerosmith were not cool. Aerosmith were like not even cool when they were around. No one ever liked them in a way that was other than just popular. They were a great live show. They were a show you go get fucked up at and get stoned at. And like going to see Aerosmith was like a thing to do. Because Zeppelin was pretty much done and whatever. Like they just became a stadium rock band. Critics didn't really like them. They weren't treated well by critics. That's not what made Aerosmith. What made them was kids calling FM radio and being like, fucking play Sweet Emotion 8 times. Like they wrote absolutely monster fucking unique, amazing rock singles. Licking a Promise, fucking Back in the Saddle, get out of here. This shit's eternal. And so, you know, this is another aspect similar to stumping for REM in real time. Think about saying like Aerosmith's fucking awesome. Like he's got a song called Aero Zeppelin or whatever on Incesticide, right? And it's for him to be just defiantly like, I don't give a shit what anybody thinks. This is what I like. That to me is one of the most important things about Cobain, but it was only really appreciated and absorbed by a pretty small sect of his audience. And I would say, like, to me, it's the most important thing about him. Like if him doing this and writing the you know, the liner notes about Polly, which is a totally apocryphal story that I just don't understand why he bit so hard on. I feel like he kind of used it as an excuse to grandstand a little bit. Sorry. But I think all of the way he repped for, you know, essentially LGBTQ communities, certainly for male homosexuality, I found it great. But then you have to contrast this with this totally bilious essay he wrote where he's like, I loathe English people. They're the worst people on the planet. I hate England. I hate English people. Like, it's unbelievable if you read it. And he's like, well, the Raincoats are okay, but, you know what I mean? Like, it's just such a bizarre tirade. He goes on about that. And so, you know, I mean, look, you don't need a perfect image of anybody. Everyone has their you know, imbalances and places where they shine and places where it's a little bit blurry. I mean, we're talking about a fucking heroin addict who fucking committed suicide with a kid, not really ticking a lot of boxes for me, certainly as a father. Yeah, he just like me FR, right? I mean, it's ridiculous. But I think when we talk about his taste, and that's what we're talking about here, when we talk about his taste, I think, you know, it's very easy for me to see in the rearview mirror being like, you know, 20 years older than he was when he killed himself. This is a guy who was informed by classic music collecting, music knowledge, music nerd, the way that worked in the 80s and the early 90s, which is that the label was the guarantor, and you learned about music through looking at the label's catalog and buying anything on that label. And his list just totally reveals that. The standout stuff is more about, you know, the things he's trying to plant a flag on, to me, and say no. One of the weird things though on this that does stand out, and I you know, this didn't come out until whenever. It's not, I don't remember him stumping for this record in real time. If anybody else does, you can Google it. There's this, I mean, if anything, Kurt Cobain has ever even so much as sneezed, it's on the internet. But he wrote this really awful, I think it's in the liner notes. Is it in the liner notes for the first Raincoats album that they DGC reissued? But he writes this really horribly anti-English tirade somewhere, and maybe it was an interview and it was transcribed. But anyway, he's got She Hangs Brightly on this list. That to me is pretty incredible, because I think it's really unlikely that, you know, barring the Rough Trade thing, again, he's hearing about it through labels. This record did nothing. I mean, it's good. I didn't like Opal, but I really liked this record. That was a big standout to me. Not in the sense, because again, it could just be that it's on Rough Trade, and he got a whole bunch of Rough Trade CDs or whatever when he went over there, right? I mean, that's completely plausibly what happened. He's got PJ Harvey's Dry on this list. Could be. But, you know, another thing too that, and like Kleenex, right? There's another classic example. He's like, oh, you got to get everything by Kleenex. You know, he's getting a bag of things filtered through labels. But there, and that's also probably how he heard of the Saints. But one that's kind of weird though, another one where it's kind of like stubbornly, hey no, is Get the Knack, and this continues with this continues with Grohl, with our boy Grohl. These guys all like wreck for this album, which is so weird to me. Like, I thought the Knack were corny as shit. Like, I understand My Sharona is a fucking, absolute historic single. It's also fucking gross when you learn what it's about. But for whatever reason, this is like the record that he and Grohl like totally bonded over, this cheesy skinny tie fucking, awful new wave shit, studio power pop guys in LA. I don't know. I mean, it could be as simple as like, this is a song he heard on the radio when he was a kid. And it's possibly that simple. But, it's just not, this is not, absolutely not my shit, I guess I'd say. What's another interesting one? Oh, and of course he's got like Lead Belly on there, which I always felt was just like, yeah, whatever, that's your thing. Detroiters. This one is pretty weird that he had this on here. So, No Cal, I'm sure got up there. It was circulating. People up where he was loved it. But, this is one, I mean, just absolutely good luck finding a copy of this shit. It's all on YouTube. Everyone's heard it, great. But, for a lot of the people that made the grunge scene, apparently this is a really iconic album cover. I know nothing about it. It's way before I would have been aware of anything cool like this. I mean, the idea that there's like a Sacramento kind of TSOL or whatever is pretty neat. But I mean, this is, look, this is 84. This is like total, this shit. This is like the time when, punk has become a total fucking costume, the joke. And there's nothing on here that's like shocking or incredible in like, compared to the Misfits or any of the other bands from this period that were so unique and developed their own sounds. This is very much like mid 80s, hardcore punk, which is like, again, the movie Suburbia, I mean, by this time it's like Vandals and all that shit is blown up and it's just gotten very, kind of performative. Like it's a lock, let's get on our boards and go down to the fucking club, dude. I'm not rubbishing My Sharona. It's a catchy song. I don't give a shit what it's about. Who fucking cares? But and the solo shreds, and it's a really original approach. Like, it defines new wave. Nothing defines new wave like Pump It Up by Elvis Costello and My Sharona. Like, that whole thing is absolutely like a thing that was new. That little like boom 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 boom. Like, I mean, you go back to the Strangeloves, I Want Candy, or Carolyn. Like, it's been around, but they did do it in a new way and they deserve credit. So, whatever. But yeah, this one's crazy. Like, if you really want to be ahead and try and track this shit down, total blank spot. I'm astonished with all the fucking reissuing and whatever that's gone on. Apparently there was a Call of the Void did a pressing. Wow. Interesting. Don't even know about this. Kurt Cobain's 32nd favorite album of all time. What a fucking pull quote. Who's running A&R at this fucking label? Oh my God, that's amazing. Jesus, that's bad. And again, only on vinyl. I guess it's never been on CD. I guess we got to try and license it. You want to get on that? Because you're in the stream. Yeah, get on it. Good. All right. Let me know when you get in touch with fucking Tales of Terror. See if we can put out a 2 CD reissue with like a boombox thing on the second disc. They'll bite. They'll go for it. Kurt Cobain's 32nd favorite LP. Man, what a legacy that is. Way to go, Tales of Terror. You will live forever.